this cage, a split-second decision can change a career. But those decisions aren't accidents. They're calculations. Whether it's a championship veteran or a massive underdog, there's always a blueprint for victory. And we're here to find it. It's time to break down all that's happened, all that's coming up, and all that's in MMA's headlines. This is Fight IQ. And now, here's your host, Tom Albano.
Happy International Fight Week, people! It's that epic time of the year once again, where the UFC comes down and transcends Las Vegas, transforms it into an absolute MMA fan dream. And with that ring, a loaded, action-packed card. And of course, we all know why we're talking about UFC 329. We always say that International Fight Week is the big one when it comes to the UFC calendar year, or at least one of the big ones. Now, it was always the biggest of the big ones, but this year it had to share some spotlight, a lot of spotlight, with the UFC White House card, UFC Freedom 250. Having said that, though, it is still a very big one. And I know a whole bunch of you have been waiting for me to say it. Zambando, Nick Morgerson, listen up. It's time for me to say the words you didn't think I would ever say in the history of any MMA show on this network since Zan and I launched the MMA Outsiders in 2022. I believe it. It's actually happening. The Notorious, the one and only Conor McGregor is making his way back to the octagon. It's his first fight in 5 years. It was July of 2021, the last time that we saw him, and he's taken on one of my favorites, the tough as nails, cool as a cucumber. It is what it is. Hawaiian-born, Hawaiian-raised, former UFC featherweight champion, former BMF champion, one of the greats of this sport, Max Holloway. I'm glad you pointed that out, Zan. And there's a specific reason why I'm wearing this. Well, two reasons. One, I was working out before and I needed to an exercise shirt. And two, I made a very bad blunder last week when I said that the PFL Media card that got delayed was last week, meaning the week that I was talking about. It's actually this week. It's actually during this weekend. So as a little mea culpa to the PFL, I'm going to rep them on this episode as a means of saying, I apologize, I got my facts wrong. And I'll have all weekend. I will have all weekend to wear UFC merchandise. Yeah, see, I make a very valid argument in both manners. Yeah, there you go. I said it's happening. Sound the alarms. And I hope I'm coming in clear. It seems like I'm coming in clear because I'm doing a dual setup for this week's show. I'm doing a dual setup for this week's show. Why did I seem to lose the ability to go into the media assets? I don't know what's going on here. Okay. See, already we're talking about some little technical glitches on this end. Give me 1 second here. You asked me to sound the alarms, and while I'm always against sounding this for the loudness of it, I am willing to turn this down and take cover because, yes, absolutely. It's true. The fight's real. The fight is actually real. It's unbelievable that we have gotten here. Nevertheless, we have gotten here. But allow me to finally, after all these minutes of messing around, welcome you all into the UFC. Pardon me, to this edition of Fight Q. I guess if you want to call this special edition, you can. Although it's the normal show, so we'll have more special edition stuff coming up later on during the weekend. All right, there we go. That's got to fix. How do you feel about the press conference being at 10 p.m. Eastern? Rough. That's very rough. But I guess they're going with the Vegas local time stuff. I guess that's going to be the logic behind it. And just trying to but you know what's the troubling part about that, Zan? The troubling part about that is Conor McGregor is never on time for these press conferences. So that means it's just going to go on and on and on and on and on and on and on until trouble happens. Because we're just going to be waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting until he finally shows up. Also, I'm going to try to run through my topics and keep the show to an hour. I know I don't want to keep everybody waiting because, of course, the USA's team is going to kick off against Belgium if the rumors of Belgium forfeiting end up not being true. Let's see what trouble when I went to see the press conference began at 4 p.m. local time. Yeah, it's always like a half-hour wait to show up. So, yeah, that's going to be trouble. All right. Speaking of trouble, I don't want to get in trouble. Let me run through what I need to run through here. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that way you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network, including all the different plans that we've got for this weekend's broadcasts. So I'll let you all know about that stuff a little later on. Of course, if you're watching on the X platforms, hit like, hit repost, quote post, or retweet, quote tweet, as us old heads like to say. And then make your way over to the YouTube home, youtube.com/ETB Network. We are now at 1,130 subscribers. And we continue on with the watch hour chase. Help us get to 3,000. Help us get to 4,000. Please help us grow on the platform that is our base, our home, and that is YouTube. youtube.com/ETB Network. Those who don't know who I am, I'm Tom Albano, a senior writer for MMA News, an MMA contributor for Deadspin, and and an online play-by-play for MVP. All right. We've got a lot that we got to write down. Oh, hold on. Social medias. Make sure you like and follow us on social media. That would be at Thomas J Albano. For me personally, that would be, and I already put down the banner, at Fight IQ ETB for the show and at ETB Network for the network. All right. Got a lot that we got to get through. Let's see. We got to. You're trusting Conor to lead. Well, I didn't say that everything was going to go smoothly. All I said was that I believe now that the fight will happen. All right. And we will preview UFC 329, but I do not want to blow the lead so early. And the reason I say that is because we are going to have a special edition of Puncher's Chance this weekend. Still trying to confirm the time, but I believe it's going to be 2 p.m. Eastern. Zan's going to be part of that. I'm going to try to get a couple other people. I can't make promises, but I'll try to get a couple of people involved with this. Special 2 p.m. Eastern start time for the UFC 329 edition of Fight IQ, the Puncher's Chance. And the comments are coming in hot and heavy. All right, we're going to talk about Conor McGregor on the show. Nick, we're going to talk about John Jones on this show. We're going to talk about Dustin Poirier on this show. Some new news developing in an interview that he did with Diary of the CEO. I have a couple of sound bites from that interview. Mid-year awards, yes. Might be some plans for a certain other award show, potentially for the end of the year to make a comeback. But mid-year awards, we're going to do a little check-in, and we'll talk about that after June. We haven't had a UFC card since the UFC Baku card a couple of weeks ago. But as of this point, what would I pick for the top four? The fighter of the year, the knockout of the year, submission of the year, and the fight of the year. We'll talk about some other miscellaneous headlines here and there. And then our UFC 329 preview, in which I'm going to explain to you why this might be the last time that we see Conor McGregor in the octagon. But not for the reasons that you all out there might think. All right? But we're going to begin with a different Conor McGregor story. And it's actually one that we discussed last week here on Fight IQ, and that's involving one Terence Crawford, the retired former undisputed welterweight champion of the world. And an interview that Conor McGregor did with Ariel Helwani, in which he talked about Terence Crawford, a proposal supposedly that went out to Terence Crawford about, hey, maybe we do a 2-fight deal in which we do one fight in a boxing ring, one fight in your world, and then one fight in my world, in the MMA world. Now, this story actually is an older story. I actually just put in the old Google machine, and there actually is a story about this from 2024. It's October of 2024. So, Zan, I think we probably covered this on the MMA Outsiders a couple of years ago. Here was the comment that Terence Crawford said at the time from ESPN. Quote, "They offered me the fight. Me and Conor got on the phone and started politicking to try and figure something out. Man, I'm not getting in no effing octagon with you so you can be kicking and elbowing me." McGregor retold the story with Helwani in an interview last week or so. And now Terence Crawford is here to share his side of the deal. Now, look at the headline because it is important. The negotiation part of this story is true. We did, but we probably didn't give it the problem probably deserved. Well, I'm going to make up for that now, Zan. All right? Now, pay close attention to the headline. Literacy lesson. Terence Crawford is not denying that he did not have negotiations with McGregor. They did. What he is claiming, however, is that McGregor had made a claim to Helwani about it was going to be a $200 million offer. And that Crawford called cap on. For you old heads out there, in the new language, in the new vernacular of the English language, to say call cap means lie. So basically, for my friend Nick Morgeson here, I'm trying to find this. Whenever I need the sound effect, it's just not there anymore. Okay. So for my friend Nick Morgeson, here's basically what Terence Crawford is saying to Conor McGregor.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God. Stop you fucking lying.
Saying that he is a liar. Here's the quote that Terence Crawford gave to Ariel Helwani in his own interview. Quote, "That was a lie. It was cap. It was never no $200 million offer. They asked me what I'd do, and I told them, you ain't about to be kicking on me, Conor. We were on FaceTime, and I did tell them that. But they didn't say, hey, you got $200 million. You fight him in boxing and MMA. That was never the case. If it was said to me, I could say there was an offer. But if nothing is previewed to me, I can't say what is what. He's making up numbers in my head." All right? So according to Crawford, he can't. So if you were to ask him, okay, what was the money amount? He cannot give you an answer. According to Crawford, they had negotiation. They had talked a little bit, but no offer was ever formally presented to him. The chance was there, but it was not for $200 million, according to Crawford, as McGregor claims. So, you could look at the story in a couple of different ways. Hold on a minute here. I have a comment here from Zan, but I'm gonna hold off on that for just a second because I want to bring up my point. because you could look at this in one of two ways. On one hand, you could say, well, Terence Crawford can't offer up what the alternative number was for this thing, then maybe he's the one who's capping. Maybe he's the one who's lying about this whole thing. But can we be real? Number one, it probably was just little talks. Probably just had, hey, two of the all-time combat greats just spitting, with one another, spitfiring ideas and seeing what sticks, if something can stick. We have, I was just with a couple of, chatting with a couple of ETV guys, and we're talking about different ideas and see what sticks. Just as a thing that happens in the media world, in the sports world. The other thing, which people are forgetting here, which is actually going to come up very later on when I preview the UFC 329 main event, for Conor McGregor, while he's under contract to do something like, box Terence Crawford, he would have to have the approval of Dana White and company over at not just the UFC brass now, but TKO. And obviously, if you know the show and you know this network, we have talked about Conor McGregor before and Dana White before, and how Dana White, regardless if it's Conor McGregor or not, refuses to do co-promotion. He did it once with Chuck Liddell. He did it once with Conor McGregor for the Floyd fight, and that's it. Now, if I'm not mistaken, he has a respect for Bud Crawford, but I don't think he's willing to do co-promotion. At least not when it benefits him. If it was only one of these things, and it was Conor boxing Crawford, it would be a flat-out no. If it was just one of these things and it was Terence Crawford stepping into the MMA cage against Conor, Dana White would be all for that, just so that way he could get hey, see? Boxing ain't got nothing on MMA. Go ask James Toney how that went for him against Randy Couture. But now I see a comment here from Zan. So, but Zan says a word here. So this requires me to go to the sound effect of my telephone here, because he uses the word C-O-N. Conspiracy? What conspiracy theory do you have, Zan? I have a conspiracy theory that Zuffa would have been informed if this fight was actually real 2024 instead of at the beginning of January. That's fair. I just said, Dana White does have a respect for Bud Crawford to the point where he wish he probably would have gotten a deal with Bud Crawford done. He wishes that Bud Crawford would be competing in Zuffa boxing today. But as I said, I feel like this story is being a little blown out of proportion simply because, Dana was not going to let something like this probably happen. Got over exaggerating negotiations, color me shocked. Yeah. No. Conor over exaggerating in negotiations, and just any sort of over exaggeration in a negotiation in combat sports. Why, I never. That story is ridiculous. It's an interesting story in that, could you imagine if this had happened? Two fights, one in boxing and one in MMA, but it's such an overblown, out of proportion thing. It's never going to happen. And like I said during the intro, I'm going to explain to you why there's a chance we may not see Conor fight anymore after this weekend, UFC or otherwise. Now, as I know, Nick Morgeson or somebody else might say to me, but Tom, technically he hasn't made the walk to the octagon yet. And I did joke with somebody the other day. Actually, no, was it with Zan? Maybe it was with Zan. Yeah, no, it was with Zan. I think it was during we were doing Tough Enough last week. I had said something along the lines of that Conor McGregor was going to tear his leg, was going to tear his ACL or break his leg on the way to the octagon again. Hold on. What's this? Conor and Dana are a match made in heaven as they both over-exaggerate ratings and contract numbers. Nick, welcome to the world of fighting. Welcome to the world of combat sports. Pleased to meet you. Welcome aboard. The reason I bring up that point, however, is because of another McGregor headline that's interesting, but is there Mauricio Ruffy. Now Mauricio Ruffy ended up knocking out Michael Chandler a couple weeks ago at the UFC White House card. And Mauricio Ruffy says that he is willing to step in on short notice if either Conor McGregor or Max Holloway fall injured or ill and are not able to make the walk on Saturday night. Mauricio Ruffy has gone as far as to say that he wants to weigh in on Friday in order to ensure himself some sort of spot. Now, on one hand, on the fighter end, the pay end, good on him because he makes the weight. That's show money. That's more money in his pocket. And who am I to when we talk about all the controversies with fighter pay in this sport, who am I to deny somebody like Mauricio Ruffy the money if he's going to go forward with something like this, especially when he just competed last month at the White House card. What also is interesting here is Mauricio Ruffy was also a name that was floated about for, when Conor McGregor returns, who should he fight? Now, what I'll say to that is, if Conor McGregor ends up fighting Mauricio Ruffy for some reason because Max Holloway withdraws, I think that's a worse matchup for him than Max Holloway himself. Oh, God. Zan's comment here. Michael Chandler is claiming that he will be in Vegas for the fight. Do you think the UFC faces off McGregor and Chandler if Conor calls him out? Zan, you just delivered to me so much freaking pain. What? It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I don't know. I don't know why they would do something like that, especially when Michael Chandler is 2-6 in the octagon. Hasn't won a fight since 2022. I feel like Michael Chandler, I feel horrible for Michael Chandler and the fact that, he had the opportunity to fight Conor McGregor and that all went up in smoke. I feel bad for Michael Chandler in that he was probably a few more punches away from beating Charles Oliveira at UFC 262, and how different his late career trajectory could have been if he was the UFC lightweight champion. But I feel like everything that's happened with, the Conor McGregor fight falling out, Michael Chandler, I guess you can say, is filled with
emotional damage.
It's stupid. I'm sorry. No, I'm not interested. And again, this goes to something I'm going to wait until we preview the fight because I have a remark and I'm interested to see if when I make this statement that I want to make, if Zan, you will respond to me in the comments or if you're going to hold your tongue until either Tough Enough on Wednesday or the UFC 329 preview show on Saturday. I feel like you're going to say something in regard to that. But going back to this point, Mauricio Ruffy would be a worse fight for Conor McGregor than Max Holloway would be. Mauricio Ruffy is a hell of a fighter coming out of the Fighting Nerds camp. He has the one loss to Benoit Saint Denis last year, and then he has a loss outside of the UFC during his early pro career. But other than that, he finished Michael Chandler with that spinning wheel kick. He's knocked out Rafael Fiziev at UFC 325 earlier this year as well. He had the spinning wheel kick knockout of King Green, which was absolutely a highlight. And he has just been a phenomenal striker and a phenomenal finisher to the point where he would be a dangerous fight for Max Holloway too. But at least with Holloway and his tough chin, he got knocked out by Ilya. But you know what? Ilya's got powerful weapons. Justin Gaethje might have beat him, but Justin Gaethje didn't come out unscathed in that fight. Really is a different beast. I think if you threw Max Holloway and Mauricio Ruffy in there with the welterweight, a late notice, if let's say Conor McGregor something were to happen, I've got a feeling that Mauricio Ruffy and Max Holloway, if they were to fight for some reason, because Conor McGregor for some reason didn't fight this weekend, that'd be a fight of the year classic. I think it would be. I think the two of them would slug it out. It would be such a slugfest. It would be the kind of BMF fight more than the BMF fight between Oliveira and Holloway was earlier this year. So that's my opinion of that situation. And if you're going to put Mauricio Ruffy, that dangerous striking, up against Conor McGregor, who I'll give Conor this. He seems locked in, seems motivated, but it's also been 5 years. And there's a chance that the UFC lightweight division, granted that this fight's taking place at welterweight, but Conor McGregor and Max Holloway are both still lightweight fighters, the division has passed him by. And I think if Mauricio Ruffy gets in there with Conor McGregor is going to have a very bad day. So good on Mauricio Ruffy, but unless something weird happens within the next coming days, I don't think we end up seeing Mauricio Ruffy in the cage. But if he becomes a backup fighter, I mean, good on him. If he weighs in, good on him. All right, let's talk about a story that has broken earlier today. Dustin Poirier, the latest update on the arrest. I have some clips here. He did an interview with Steve Bartlett with Diary of the CEO, where he talked about the consequences of what happened, as well as his own interpretation of events as to what happened on that night. On that Father's Day, where he was arrested in the airport. So let me play for you. Which one will I do? Let me play for you his interpretation of the events, his explanation as to what happened and why he was drunk in the airport and got belligerent with an officer.
Part of that, me getting in trouble at the airport, was I just felt, it's not my weight to carry, but I just felt I try to help him out, and he's back out on the street. It's like it almost doesn't want help, and I was just kind of, on Father's Day, I was traveling to work, and I just couldn't stop thinking about my father, and I started drinking in the airport, and that's kind of what led to the incident. It's just, but when I feel like that, I've been going to therapy and stuff like that. Years ago, I started going to therapy, and when I started feeling better, I stopped practicing everything I learned through therapy, and then I felt that feeling again, just I guess call it depression, just didn't feel well. And when I feel like that, I know I shouldn't drink, and I drank anyway. So, not that my father, anything's an excuse. Obviously I did what I did. But I knew better in the moment when I'm feeling like that to drink or do anything. Alcohol has never benefited me, especially in times like that where I'm mentally not the best.
And like I said last week, I give credit to the man for taking ownership of his actions. I know Dustin Poirier, for fuller context, is talking about his father in that clip. And Dustin Poirier, upbringing was a little rough. As he mentions, his father indeed was an alcoholic. And I know Dustin has been trying to be a great example of a family man to his wife, Jolie, to their daughter, being the kind of father to, not end up with the situation that he has with his current father. And some people might say, oh, it's a damn shame that he's not helping his father out. What kind of son is he? And, I have a very great relationship with my parents. But on the other hand, when it comes to dealing with not just any family member or friend, just an individual, when you are dealing with an individual that is caught up in an addiction of something, particularly when it comes to alcohol or drugs, and they live almost a life of dependency on those kinds of substances. You can try to help them out all you want. But at the end of the day, it can't be some sort of relationship where it's codependency. It can't be some sort of relationship where you are providing everything for them and they give you nothing in return, and they continue to go through with their demons and live with their demons. I'm not an advocate for saying something like to abandon. But what I am saying is this is a situation where, with the situation with Dustin and his father, like the situation that's going on with Dustin and his father isn't just about a father-son kind of connection. It's about what happens to those who struggle with dependency on substances, whether it be chemical dependency, alcohol, or whether it be with drugs. It's a really tough scene. And Dustin has talked about how he has been, struggling with alcohol. He talked about that in his statements that came out in immediate aftermath of what happened on that Father's Day. And Dustin Poirier is owning up to it. And he also talks about the consequences that are going to come and have already happened.
It's kind of murky right now. I think it's still too fresh. I know one big one isn't a sponsor anymore.
Oh, you lost a sponsor?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure I lost a few. I'm waiting to see when the smoke clears who's still with me or not. That day cost me not only embarrassment to my family, it cost me a lot of money too, I'm losing sponsors, I'm losing gigs and losing things that I had set up. And then a big sponsor of mine is gone because of it.
In an interview that I watched, that you'd reached out to, was it Paramount?
Oh, I work with Paramount. Yeah.
You work with them, and you have a contract with them?
Yeah, I did. We'll see.
Oh, you're worried that it might not be?
It could be. Yeah.
I guess when something like this...
I had a year contract with Paramount CBS to work the desks for the fights.
Well, I hope they all stick with you.
We'll see. I'm going to learn from this and continue pushing forward, and it will never happen again. It's going to affect the trajectory of my whole life. This one arrest,
Are you set up sufficiently? Because there's a lot of talk around fighters not getting paid that much in the UFC as well.
The career I've had, I don't have to work another day in my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Because a lot of people also, they go out and they, we hear the stories of buying a little too many watches or gambling or whatever it might be.
I need to stop gambling. That's what I need to do.
Okay.
I told my wife the other day, she was like, I just paid some bills. I saw you made another deposit to the gambling thing. I was like, I can't cold turkey everything. Give me one. Let's go one thing at a time. One thing, gambling's a couple steps up on the list. I got some other things I need to stop doing first.
Maybe not the smartest comment to make when you are in the middle of a situation where you've just been arrested, and I've talked about, addiction to alcohol that you're trying to, remove yourself from. But at the same time, you see him with, Dustin Poirier is one of the good guys of this sport. But he's not above the law, and he's not above consequences, and he's going to be paying for it. As far as what he said about him saying, we'll see about what happens with Paramount and CBS. I think with what Dustin has done in terms of charitable work and what he's done with the Octagon, in terms of his popularity as a fighter, and that we haven't really seen any sort of mistake with Dustin up until this point, I think Dana White would advocate for him to Paramount and CBS and say, you need to give him another chance. You're probably not going to see him on the desk this weekend. And that's probably, it's a missed opportunity on his book. You talk about the consequences. You could have been there for the fight of the guy that you forced out of action for 5 years. And you're not going to be there. That's a consequence. But before the year is over, Dustin Poirier is going to be back at the analyst desk. He's going to be. The other part to the story, now I don't have the audio for this simply because when I was going over all of this, it was a 5-minute long piece of audio, and we have a lot to talk about this week. So I'm not going to go into all of that with that audio, but it is kind of important that I do bring it up. So he says he's been dealing with depression for years. I'm taking the summary notes from MMA On Point, in that he's been going to therapy, which you heard in the first clip. And by the way, I know Sean Strickland is the guy who likes to stir things up. I know Sean Strickland is who he is in terms of his views on politics, his views on gender, and his views on characteristics of individuals based within their gender. To say, I get where Strickland was coming from. It's about why he says, he doesn't feel any sort of depression because, he thinks of the less fortunate. But there is scientific evidence out there about what a depressed brain looks like and what the chemicals and the chemical imbalance that occurs within the brain during depression versus what a normal brain looks like. So for him to basically tell Dustin Poirier, man up, especially when Dustin's talking about everything and Dustin's at one of the lowest points of his life. Come on, man. I shouldn't be surprised because it's Sean Strickland, but it's absolutely ridiculous.
Dumbass.
Seriously. Let's see. There were other notes that I wanted to bring up. He has not watched the arrest video, but is remorseful for what happened. He's not seeking sympathy. He wishes to thank the policeman for how he handled the situations to make it worse, and you actually see that a little bit on the arrest video itself. He's uninstalled all social media. Says he started drinking when he was 12 or 13 years old. 12 to 13 years old, man. Jeez. Like that's a really horrific. Yes, Christy, depression is a very serious matter that needs to be taken seriously. But jeez Louise, I don't see a note on here that there was something that he was looking at with his wife. Okay, here's it from Combat Casuals. After his recent arrest, Dustin Poirier detailed his fears around CTE, saying that his wife noticed alarming changes in his behavior. Neurologists found thinning and separation in his brain, pushing him to retire, which explains why he retired following the Max Holloway fight last year. Quote, I have scarring and stuff. I have thinning in the back of my brain, and you have a septum in your brain like your nose. My septum is separated a good bit. Neurologists think my left and right sides aren't communicating as smoothly as they should. Now, part of the reason for the struggles, it seems, with Dustin, which I talked about last week, is the struggles that some fighters have when their careers are done. I'll actually stretch that more. The struggles that athletes have when their careers are done, and they're like, okay, what's next? I've worked all my life to be a whatever athlete. I worked all my life dedicating myself to this sport, and now it's all gone. But at the same time, then Dustin comes out with some other comments in another interview talking about, hey, if the UFC offered me Nate Diaz or Conor McGregor, I'd come back out and I'd actually do the fight. Which, try not to facepalm, but when you're in the kind of situation that things are in right now, and you're talking about CTE. Your thought should be, is he drinking to self-medicate? Potentially. Nick, potentially. Yeah, Christy seems to be in agreement with that there's potential. And my point was, I get you work all your life to be a fighter. You're going to go back there when you've seen signs that you might have a brain that has been damaged by CTE. when you are at the biggest, low point and the controversy of your entire life, of your public, your career as a public figure in the world. That's just not. It's no. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to do this to Dustin, with considering everything, but to say stuff like that,
it make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense. And I don't want Dustin Poirier to take more damage than he absolutely has to, especially given the circumstances and everything. I want Dustin Poirier to have a great great post-career life. I want him to continue to be a great father to his daughter. I want him to continue to be a great husband. I want him to continue with the foundation that he set up and the people that are benefiting from this foundation, people he is helping. Does the UFC do enough testing for head injuries and CTE to protect guys from themselves? It seems like no. You can't look at a situation like this, Nick, and say that they are. All right. Want to move off this? We got some more topics that we got to get through. We only have about 20 minutes or so left. A couple of interesting notes from Daniel Cormier, who did a Q&A session with fans, and he talked about his arch rival John Jones in one particular moment. Okay, here it is. And they talked about the potential. He was talking about the potential about wrestling John Jones, or John Jones stepping onto the mat of, let's say, Real American Freestyle, RAF. Cormier and Jones actually partook in a Russian reality show, which is the Russian version of The Ultimate Fighter, where they served as coaches. And you saw a little bit more of their tension, the old rivalry being renewed. And according to Cormier, Jones is not interested in doing any sort of wrestling. Quote, the thing with John Jones, it wouldn't be RAF because they can't afford to pay it. There's an organization that offered us both 7 figures for a 6-minute match. He will not do it. I'm telling you, he will not do it. I'm not lying. I went through the negotiations and I said, if he wrestles me, I'll do it. But it's going to be 10-0. I'm going to tech him. He's referring to what's called a technical fall. If you get up 10 points on your opponent in amateur Olympic freestyle wrestling, you automatically win the match. Cormier continued, but unfortunately, he knows it's going to be 10-0, so he won't do it. Now, if they go to wrestling, do an actual wrestling match. Now, on one hand, I don't think Cormier would dominate Jones in the way that he thinks. I think he could get a tech, but John Jones has also competed in submission grappling. So I don't think that, it's going to be as bad of a blowout as he thinks. On the other hand, do I see John Jones not wanting to do much? I mean, who's to say if John Jones is even fighting anymore, considering the whole, considering him playing Brett Favre last year, where he retired, and then once Trump announced the UFC wild card, he's like, I'm not retired anymore. I'm back into the game, baby. And we still haven't seen him fight since the win over Stipe. So that's just, I don't know. He doesn't need to fight. I think Cormier doesn't need to do anything like this. But Cormier, I don't know if he's over-exaggerating the truth to trying to cope for the fact that he never got a win over John Jones, or if there's something more to it. There's some hold on, comment coming in. Let's see. John Christy, I'm in the MMA media world, and I've been an MMA fan for so many years. John Jones confuses me as well. You're not alone. I wish Zan was still here so he can maybe verify if he feels the exact same way about John Jones. The other story, now Christy, you'll like this one because it does involve WWE a little bit, is about Brock Lesnar. Daniel Cormier, when he won the heavyweight championship, he became a champ at UFC 226. There was that very infamous moment after the fight where Brock Lesnar got called into the octagon. Brock Lesnar was there at octagon side. Lesnar gets into the octagon and shoves Cormier. And it's like, okay, so Brock Lesnar's going to come back to the UFC, and he's going to fight Daniel Cormier. And around that time, there were plenty of rumors about Brock Lesnar going back. I remember, Christy will love this story. I remember attending SummerSlam 2017, and there was a spot in the match that Brock Lesnar was competing in where I think it was Braun Strowman took him out through the barricade, and they were going to they faked a stretcher spot with Lesnar. And as Lesnar was being placed on the stretcher, you had the crowd at the Barclays Center going, na, 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 because a lot of people had heard about the reports about Lesnar, debating if he was going to stay with WWE or go back to UFC. And so, hey. Now, a lot of the crowd said goodbye. I was one of the people who said, no, hey, UFC. I thought he was going to the UFC at that point. But actually, let me go back to Dan's comment a little bit. But yeah, so there was that. And Daniel Cormier talked about in the Q&A session about what could have happened with the Brock Lesnar fight. So here's his quote. Man, I wanted that so bad. Because, of course, Cormier is a very big wrestling fan. Brock Lesnar, I know him. We both wrestled in junior college in the same year. He wrestled at Minnesota the same year I was at Oklahoma State. It didn't happen because the WWE gave him too much money. And he made the right choice. You talk about a man that money follows, it's Brock Lesnar. He's done really well for himself. I'm proud of him. Yeah, I mean, even today, Brock Lesnar, they had the retirement angle of WrestleMania. He's back. He wrestled Oba Femi, and now he's going to be competing against Oba again at SummerSlam. Maybe, and, the fact that that's in Minnesota, maybe he finally retires from combat competition once and for all there, but you never know. WWE, TKO, from the Vince McMahon time to the current TKO time, and even during the very controversial stretch that Brock Lesnar had when he was outside the ring, on the sidelines, and all those allegations against him, against John Laurinaitis and Vince McMahon, WWE always treated him very well. So, like DC said, good on Brock. He, it was more worth it to him to be the star that he is in WWE, versus trying to hang in there against somebody like a Daniel Cormier. Even if he could have been UFC heavyweight champion of the world again. Let's see. I think Lesnar was messing with everyone. I think SummerSlam might fight. I mean, SummerSlam's in Minnesota this year. It makes sense. Hold on. I don't even care anymore. Come talk to me when he's ready to fight, Tom. Until then, he's irrelevant to me. See, Christy? We're all confused about John Jones. Everyone is. All right. Mid-year award check-in. So, I have 4 little awards here, and I'm not going to go too in deep to it because, number one, we're running out of time, and we're running out of time. And number two, obviously, this is just mid-year awards. We still have another half of the year to go, but let me talk about the fight of the year, and I also have the Tapology links in front of me to what their all rankings are for this kind of stuff. So the fight of the year so far, according to Tapology, is Curtis Blades versus Josh Hogan at UFC 327. And I mean, that's a very good choice. It probably is my choice for right now for fight of the year. Topuria versus Gaethje, I think was a great moment, but not so much the fight itself. The fight was cool and interesting, but the Blades Hogan fight was an absolute slugfest, heavyweight slugfest, and heavyweight has been needing some sort of life, some sort of energy. And I feel like no matter what you feel about Josh Hogan or Curtis Blades, they gave a respite from the misery that is the current state of the heavyweight division in the UFC. Gaethje versus Pimlet, I don't know what that's doing sitting at number 2 on Tapology. It was a good fight, and it showed Pimlet had a lot of heart, but Gaethje clearly won that fight. 4, it lists as Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira. I would probably have that at number 2. Mason Jones, Axel Sosa is probably up there as well. But yeah, Blades Hoket's pretty much the clear fight of the year right now. Gaethje Ilya, again, Gaethje Ilya, Zen, I kind of disagree. I think it was a good fight. It's not my choice for fight of the year right now. I think it made a great moment, but Blades and Hoket, they could, that fight could have gone either way with the way that those two were swinging and the way that heavyweight can be. So right now I'm leaning to Blades Hoket. What do I have next on this list? Submission of the year. I think submission of the year was the most disrespectful the fan rankings have been. You literally had the first ever capsule lock in UFC history that Alisar Arlene used to get the victory over Polyana Viana. You had the fourth ever twister in UFC history. I think the first one of the Scottish variety. That was done by, what's his name? Magomedov. Murtazali Magomedov. That was at Vegas 119 not too long ago. You have, I just went off about it the other time, one of the other episodes that we had this month, last month. Asu Almabayev, the fourth ever Sulev stretch in UFC history. And those three apparently didn't even make the top 5 so far on the Tapology rankings. Valid Sulev stretch in my opinion. I'm going to go with the capsule lock from Alice Ardeline, just because of the uniqueness of it. It hadn't been done before in the octagon. It's one of the most unique looking submissions that I've ever seen. I was completely confused by what happened. I thought it was just injury. The positioning of the leg was just something else. I think Alice Ardeline deserves a lot more respect. The fact that none of those are in the top 5 of what the fans on Tapology are voting for top submission of the year so far, that is disrespectful. Absolutely disrespectful. None of those 3 even are in the top 5 on Tapology. As I'm trying to pull up the US game right now, here's what they list for submissions right now. Mario Batista's submission choke of Oliveira in February. Jacob Wilkos submission choke of Gafarov in February. Salkit's submission of Malarkey at 325. Mikolev's submission of Elliott at 325. And Alberto Montez's submission choke of Ricky Tercios at 326. I really don't think any of those 5 compared to the 3 that I mentioned already. I think it's pretty damn disrespectful. Let's see. Knockout of the year. Uros Medic. Right now, the Tapology has Uros Medic, his knockout of Jeff Neal. I'd probably put that at number 2. The one that blew my mind the most this year was probably Alexa Grasso knocking out Macy Barber, which also can kind of count as a submission of the year too. She blasts her with a left cross. Barber goes down, and Grasso puts her in a choke right away when she didn't even need to. The fight was over at that point. Barber was dropping. It was a hell of a finish from Alexa Grasso. I think I expected her to win, but not that. Not a finish like that. That was hella something. Alexa Grasso was my knockout of the year. And then fighter of the year, I mentioned him having the moment and the fact that he's in 2 of the top fights of this year. It has to be Justin Gaethje. It has to be right now. Somebody could argue Strickland because he finished Hernandez and then reclaimed the middleweight title. Valid. Somebody could say Hoket for all the controversy he's generating and 2 wins, one of which was a fight of the year nominee. Sure. Somebody could say Ruffy because of his finish, in January, and then the finish he had of Michael Chandler. Valid. Justin Gaethje, with what he's accomplished this year, beating Paddy Pimblett in a hell of a fight to win the interim belt, and then probably last chance, probably retires with a loss, back to the wall, American needing a win on the UFC Freedom 250 card, and he pulls it off and finishes Ilya in the way that he did, like no one has ever beaten Ilya before. Yeah, it's Justin Gaethje for me. Clear as day. All right, let's do the big finish before we get to a little bit of UFC preview and some trivia. All right, little big finish style. Paddy Pimblett was recently interviewed. Paddy Pimblett's fighting in the co-main event of UFC 329 this weekend. He's taking on Benoit Saint Denis. And Paddy Pimblett was talking about, the potential that he could fight Ilia Topuria now that Topuria has lost his title. And Paddy says that he's going to fight Benoit Saint Denis, and then he wants to fight one more time later this year after that. And Paddy even mentions it in the interview. Ilya, you see the way that he was busted up and the way that he was beaten in that fight with Justin. Ilya's not fighting again this year. We'll be lucky to see Ilya next year at some point in spring or summer of next year. Just a side note, the singing of the national anthem, the amount that the crowd at the World Cup in Seattle is singing right now on Monday Night Soccer. Never heard anything like that. It's been a long time since I've heard anything like that. Oh, Zan giving us a little tease for Saturday. Here we go. He's got a bold prediction for that one. All right. Let me get back over here. Justin Gaethje, following his championship win, by the way, got to visit the White House and took photos with U.S. President Donald Trump. Looks great with him. And, I feel so happy for Gaethje, man. I don't think it was clear enough when I was praising him in the fight of the year category and the fighter of the year category. I don't think I'm praising him enough, am I? Justin Gaethje is having a freaking year in this sport. For a guy who could have, the rumors were about him retiring possibly, is at the sunset of his career, and he is just coming off and doing all of this. And now there's a chance, all these rumors about could Conor fight him next, depending on what happens with Conor. Gaethje's having a blast, man. Praise him for all of what he's done. Two fights have been announced in terms of headliners, both in August. UFC Shanghai, August 29th. Umar Nurmagomedov is going to be taking on Song Yadong. Song Yadong, he had the loss to Sean O'Malley at UFC 324 earlier this year, but he had a great rebound in his last outing. Pardon me, he had a great performance in his last outing. Hell of a striker, and then he submitted Davison Figueiredo in the way that he did. It was fantastic. Song Yadong is a really underrated name in the bantamweight division and somebody who deserves a lot of respect. But this is going to be a very big challenge for him. I mean, look at who he's competing up against. Joe Rogan introduced that name. Umar Nurmagomedov, who was one round away from becoming a bantamweight champion of the world. And, other than that joke against, other than that one joke in that bantamweight title fight against Merab Dvalishvili, I think this is an excellent matchup. Don't get me wrong. It's fun. I just think that this is for Song Yadong, this is a little bit too much of a challenge. Mateusz Gamrot taking on Quillan Salkid, UFC Vegas 120, the main event, August 8th. I think this is a huge opportunity for Salkid to really make a name for himself and make sure he, gets a solid positioning for himself in the lightweight rankings. All right. Let's talk about UFC 329 briefly, because I know I'm running into overtime. It looks like Belgium's going to play. So those of you who were hoping for a forfeit, or those of you who were thinking potential forfeit, no, we're gonna get a game. We're gonna get some action. Anyways, let me talk about the stakes for McGregor versus Holloway for a second. it's a hell of a fight, And I mean, I think personally, there is more on the line for Max Holloway than there is for Conor McGregor. For Max Holloway, I mean, yes, this is a fight that's going on at welterweight, despite the fact that they're lightweights who are competing in this matchup, and the fact that Max Holloway hasn't competed at welterweight before, has only fought a handful of times at lightweight before. Yes, it is a concern for me. Max Holloway wins this fight. People can move the goalposts on him and say, well, you fought somebody who hasn't won a fight in 6 years, hasn't won a meaningful fight in a decade. So, granted, it's Conor McGregor, who's still a very popular name. It's Conor McGregor, who's still, I'm sure the viewership for this Saturday's card is going to be high, very high. So, in terms of, it being a legacy fight, this is great for Max Holloway. But if he loses to Conor McGregor, who's going to want to fight Max Holloway? If he loses to Conor McGregor, Max Holloway, there's a good chance, could be the kind of person that, people will want to look at, or when I say people, other fighters might want to look at as a gatekeeper kind of role. Hey, he was one of the greatest, kind of falling off a little bit. I saw a stat out there that he's only 7-6 since his winning streak ended. And that's all I would say. He's got more to lose. He's got a lot to lose if he loses to Conor McGregor. He wants to stay relevant. He wants to get another crack at becoming a BMF champion. He wants the opportunity to become potentially a UFC lightweight champion. And that lightweight division is full of killers. And if that lightweight division is full of killers, then why am I not saying anything on the McGregor end? Oh, it definitely is high stakes in the McGregor end, in that, he's putting reputation out there. He has not fought in 5 years. He hasn't had a win since, like I said, he hasn't had a win in 6 years. He hasn't had a meaningful win since he became the first ever UFC champ in November 2016, 10 years ago. And yet, I don't know if their stakes are that high, because, of course, if he wins, maybe they elevate him right away to a potential title shot just because it's Conor freaking McGregor. If he loses, I don't think McGregor has much to lose because of the fact that he's been out so long, ever since losing to the 2 fights to Poirier in 2021. And the other thing, and this is what I was teasing before, is that why I teased at the start of the show? I said, I'm Conor McGregor. You're probably looking at me now like, what do you mean he doesn't have much to lose?
Make it make sense to me.
I will, Michael K. Everyone is looking, talking about, Conor might retire with a loss because he's not going to look great and this and that and yada, yada. It's not about that. And I asked James Lynch about this earlier, and James said it's a pretty good question. He's not even sure about the answer. And that is that, as far as we know, Conor has a contract about, in a transition over from to Paramount Plus, what happened with the pay-per-view points. But as far as we know, Conor McGregor is still on that 2-fight deal. So he's going to have one more fight after this. My hot take is that I could see the UFC sidelining Conor McGregor, win or lose. Just simply because he'll have one fight left on this deal. And I think we're going to go into that blinking contest again, where are the UFC going to book him that last fight and allow him out of that contract? Finally allow him out of the UFC? Or are they going to do whatever it takes to ensure that Conor stays under a contract and offer, how Dana talked about how he has to offer fighters 3 fights, offer him some measly no-name, nobody's going to want to see this kind of fight. Just say, hey, we offered him fights. This goes back to when we were talking about all the, controversies with Conor McGregor. I think I was talking about this with Nick Morgeson a couple of years ago, with the UFC and considering the way fighter contracts are structured, Dana could just kick back and relax. Like, we don't have to worry about anything with Conor outside the cage or inside the cage because, he can't do anything. And that's why I said what I said before with the Terence Crawford story being blown out of proportion. Right now, with him being under this current 2-fight deal, he can't go anywhere. He can't do anything unless he gets approval from the UFC. Even though he's part owner of BKFC, for him to have some sort of BKFC fight with Mike Perry, he has to get UFC approval. And you think the UFC is going to let something like that happen? Here's my response. He may not be the Conor McGregor of 2020, let alone 2015. But Conor McGregor is still one of the biggest stars in this sport has ever seen. Not just the UFC, the sport of mixed martial arts. The impact he's had, the legacy he's had. They are not going to let Conor McGregor, in my opinion, they're not going to let Conor McGregor walk in the way that, and give him the chance that he could end up in BKFC in a fight with Mike Perry, or even worse for them, if Jake Paul gets his hands on Conor McGregor for a boxing or MMA fight. I don't know if Jake Paul's going to box again after what happened with the Anthony Joshua fight. And that's what James Lynch said earlier about, the injury that Jake Paul got in that fight. But still, just the chance that it could happen. I mean, Conor McGregor may not fight ever again after this just simply because he doesn't have to fight. But at the same time, are they really going to allow even the slightest chance that it could happen? He does something outside of the UFC? Probably not. And like I said before, I think the viewership, it's all going to be about this. What is the impact of Conor McGregor? Not just in the cage, but like when it comes to rating, when it comes to numbers, and social media traction. It's still Conor McGregor. There's still going to be plenty of people tweeting. There's still going to be plenty of people watching. And like I said, there's no more pay-per-view, which means it's even better for them because you know what? They could just, anybody who has a Paramount Plus subscription could be going through and you're looking for something on Saturday night. Oh, it's Conor McGregor. I remember him. He's fighting again. Cool. Oh, McGregor and Holloway fight. Cool. I could just tune in and watch. Nick Morganson just talked about, with a Paramount Plus subscription, he can enjoy the fights all he wants and try to get more into things. And he wants to watch all the numbered cards. So my point being, people are still going to tune in. And Conor McGregor and what he wants and his goals don't all mesh up well with the UFC's. Because the UFC is going to see those numbers. They're like, oh, we're not going to take the chance that MVP or BKFC are going to get those kind of numbers. Hell no, you're staying here. And Conor McGregor is going to see those numbers, and he's going to want to get out of the UFC contract. Because like, oh, imagine I go box Jake Paul and do that whole crossover bit. Imagine what happens, when me and Mike Perry start trading barbs. People are going to watch. People are going to talk about it. So that's my whole reason as to why this might be the last fight of Conor McGregor's career. Not having to do with anything about wins or losses, but the contract situation is going to rear its ugly head again until either the UFC acquiesces and books him a last fight. I don't think it's going to be in April of 2027, like Conor McGregor claims. But unless one of two things happen, that the UFC acquiesces and gives him another fight to let him out of the contract, or Conor McGregor signs a new extension, I think we're going to be at stalemate again. I think we're going to be at deadlock again. The other storylines we got Gable Steveson's UFC debut, and with the heavyweight division being as crap as it is, they're going to obviously, Josh Hockett is making a name for himself and quickly rose up through the ranks, controversy or not. But when the UFC heavyweight division is the state that it is, when 1 year ago, Kuniev was 0-1, controversial loss to Curtis Blades, and he was ranked number 15. Like that just goes to show you the difficulties of the heavyweight division. Gable Steveson trained under John Jones, and Belgium just scored. Oh, man, the USA is going to eat a ton of crap if they lose. Oh, man. Anyways, Gable Steveson making his UFC debut. Obviously, he's got some controversy, some baggage with him too, but legendary wrestler in Minnesota, former All-American, former NCAA heavyweight champion, former Olympic gold medalist. There's going to be a lot of hype around him. I just hope the UFC takes their time with him, but you consider what's going on with the heavyweight division. You consider how he's trained by John Jones, and you consider his accolades before the UFC. And the name that he has, he's probably going to rise up the ranks pretty quick. And you just got to hope for the UFC's sake that it doesn't backfire on them. Bellator tried to push Aaron Pico to the moon almost right away, and look what happened to him. Other notable storylines, like I mentioned, Paddy Pimblett's taking on Benoit Saint Denis. Zan has a hot take, which he'll talk about on Saturday. Robert Whittaker moving up to light heavyweight concerns me a lot. It's the later stage of his career, and while he did pretty well for himself, going up from welterweight to middleweight in 2013, 2014, a jump up to another 20 pounds is a concern. I worry if he goes up against somebody like an Olberg, a Yuri, or actually, let me double check who Whittaker is fighting this weekend. Is it Krylov? Yeah, it's Krylov. That's a bit of a dangerous matchup for Whittaker too. Older age and later on in his career, trying to go up 20 pounds and taking on the kind of light heavyweight power. I'm concerned. I'm very concerned about that. All right, but more on UFC 329 this weekend. Let me quickly do some MMA trivia with y'all. So here are the answers to last week's questions. Left stretch. The two people who had left stretches on the same card, minutes apart from one another, that was Aljamain Sterling and good old Zabit Magomed Sharapov. I miss Zabit. He was looking to be one of the freaking best. It's a shame that his career ended so suddenly. But the two of them submitted their opponents minutes apart from each other at UFC 228 in September of 2018. Dustin Poirier famously holds the joint record for most fight of the night bonuses in UFC history. Who's the other absolute lightweight savage that he shares the record with? Good old Nate Diaz. And then Conor McGregor, talking about getting lost in it and the legacy of Conor McGregor, talking about the idea of champ status. Who are the other champs in UFC history? 2 belts simultaneous. I mentioned Daniel Cormier earlier, Amanda Nunes, and Henry Cejudo. George St. Pierre, John Jones, and Alex Pereira both won belts in 2 divisions, but they didn't hold them simultaneously. All right, so let's get to this week's questions, and it's all about those 2 names, Conor McGregor and Max Holloway. Your Max Holloway focus question. I mentioned a long winning streak that he had. I said, he's been 7-6 since the end of that win streak, which came to an end in 2019. How long, how many fights was that win streak? For the Conor McGregor question, it's an easy one, a little bit of a softball for the MMA fans, especially MMA fans of my age. Conor McGregor, I mentioned 10 years ago, became the first champ in UFC history. What event did he do that in? Where was that event? And who did he fight? Give me the circumstance of that matchup. And then this is the second time that McGregor and Holloway are going to fight. Their first fight came, I actually watched it over this past weekend. Their first fight came in August of 2013. They were a prelim fight on an undercard. They were a prelim fight. Pardon me. They were on the undercard for Actually, you know what? I'm going to make that a trivia question too about that event. The fight that the event that they had their first fight on. Who was the main event? Where did that card take place? And what was significant about that event? Not about the McGregor Holloway fight on the undercard or one of those two fighters, but something about that event too. All right. So let me go over some programming notes. You're going to see the Tough Enough on Wednesday, like in the normal time, like we talked about. Special start time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, this Saturday for a special UFC 329 edition of The Puncher's Chance. Zam Bando, my old MMA Outsiders co-host, who hosts Bando's Breakdowns, hosts Zanzinger Part 2, hosts ETV Sports. He's going to join me. We're going to talk all about UFC 329, go over the fights, do the best bets. We're going to see if we can try to get some other people, but we're going to do 2 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, special start time, all the fun with that. And a big programming note. So I'm going to be away from the network for a couple of days next week. So for that reason, Fight IQ is going to air. Actually, that's incorrect. Give me 1 second. I had it listed at 10 a.m. I believe there's going to, yeah, I'm sorry. My apologies. This was, that was my original plan. I had to make a bit of a change. Sunday, July 12th, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific, hours after the card ends. We'll do a post show immediately after the card, and then we will have the next episode of Fight IQ on Sunday morning. Because then Fight IQ won't air on the Monday night, and normal Monday night time slot. We'll be back the week after. But on the next episode of Fight IQ, we'll break down everything that happens at UFC 329. We'll do a little preview of UFC Oklahoma City, with that main event, of course, being Dricus du Plessis versus Kamaru Usman, and all that and more. But I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. Just one last reminder, make sure you hit the like button, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. If you're watching on the X platforms, or any of the ETBX platforms, hit like, repost, quote post, and then come over to YouTube home, youtube.com/ETB Network, and help us grow there. Make sure to follow us on social media at FightIQ and at ETB Network, and you can follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Tune into Tough Enough Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern. Tune into the UFC 329 pre-show, the special edition of Puncher's Chance, Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. We'll see you there. Enjoy all the action. This is Tom Albano saying good night. Good night.